Good day, everyone. My name is Flory Rose Espaldon, and I will continue the report about Chapter 13, the Aggregate Planning. I will continue about the aggregate planning outputs, the total cost of the plan. This refers to the estimated overall cost associated with the productions and resource allocation strategy developed through aggregate planning. It takes into account factors such as labor, materials, equipment, inventory costs, and backorder cost. We have five projected levels, and the first one is the inventory. Aggregate planning helps to determine the desired levels of inventory be maintained during the planning period. It provides estimates of how much inventory should be on hand to meet customer demand while minimizing costs and ensuring smooth operations. The next is output. Aggregate planning establishes the expected levels of production's output required to meet customer demand. It involves determining the overall production's target and scheduling the production activities accordingly. The third is employment. Aggregate planning helps to determine the estimated workforce levels required to meet the projected production's output. It involves analyzing labor requirements and considering factors such as hiring, training, and overtime to ensure good staffing levels. The next is subcontracting. The project levels of subcontracting indicate the importance to which external resource will be utilized. And last is the back ordering. Back ordering refers to accepting orders from customers and fulfilling them at a later date when production grabs up. The projected levels of back ordering indicate the extent to which this strategy may be used. The next is aggregate planning strategies. We have three planning strategies, which are the proactive, reactive, and the mix. Proactive is the alter demand to match capacity. So, proactive strategy focuses on changing customers' demand to match production's capacity. And the reactive is the alter capacity to match demand. The second is the reactive strategies focuses on changing production's capacity to match customer in the demand. And the last is the mix, some of each. Mixed strategy combines elements of both approaches depending on the situations. These strategies allow companies to adapt their operations effectively, ensuring that they can meet customer demand while maintaining efficiency and managing cost. The next is the demand options. In terms of pricing, used to shift the demand from peak to off-peak periods because price elasticity is important. By offering a lower prices or discounts during less busy times, they can incentivize customer to make purchases when the demand is lower. Price elasticity, which refers to how sensitive customers are to price changes, is an important factor to consider when implementing pricing strategies. The next is the promotions, like advertising and other forms of promotions. Companies can create marketing campaigns or special offers to attract customers and encourage them to make purchases. Promotional activities can be targeted at specific products or services, or they can focus on promoting the company as a whole. And the next is the back orders. Orders are taken in one period and deliveries promised for a later period. So, back ordering allows companies to accept orders from customers even when they are unable to immediately fulfill them due to capacity constraints Customers are informed that the delivery of their orders will be delayed, but they are willing to wait for the product or service. These options helps manage demand during period of high demand. Last is the new demand. Companies can actively work to generate new demand for their products or services. This can involve developing new marketing strategies, exploring new customer segments, or introducing new product or service to the market. After the demand options, we have a supply options. The first one is hire and lay off a worker. Hiring additional workers can increase production's capacity during periods of high demand, while laying off workers can help reduce costs during periods of low demand. The next is the overtime or slack time. By allowing employees to work overtime or adjusting their work hours, companies can increase or decrease the available production time. Overtime enables companies to produce more during peak periods, while slack time allows for reduced productions during low demand periods. The next is the part-time workers. Employing part-time workers provide flexibility in managing production's capacity. Next is the inventories. By strategically managing inventory levels, company can store extra production during low demand periods and fulfill customer orders from the inventory during high demand periods. Last is the subcontracting. Companies can outsource specific productions activities to external suppliers or subcontractors. These options allow them to utilize additional resources and production's capacity without incurring the cost of extending their facilities or hiring more workers. This is aggregate planning pure strategies. Capacity strategies is maintaining a steady rate of regular time output while meeting variations in demand by a combinations of options like inventories, overtime, part-time workers, subcontracting, and bulk orders. Next is the chase demand. The matching capacities to demand, the planned output for a period is set at the expected demand for the period. Chase demand in aggregate plannings refers to a strategy where the company produces exactly what is needed to meet customer demand without excess or shortage. This strategy aims to achieve a balance between the supply and demand, ensuring efficient resource utilizations and minimizing inventory costs. Next is chase approach. Capacities are adjusted to match demand requirements over the planning horizon. This approach aims to maintain a balance between supply and demand by flexible adapting the production's capacity to meet the changing needs of customers. The advantages of change approach is investment in inventory is low. Second is the labor utilizations in high. And the disadvantage of change approach is the cost of adjusting output rates and or workforce levels. Approach capacities are kept constant over the planning horizon. The advantage is the stable output rates and workforce. The disadvantage is the greater inventory cost, increase overtime and idle time. Resource utilizations vary over time. The next is the techniques for aggregate planning, the general procedures. The first is determine the demand for each period. This involves analyzing historical data, market trends, customer forecasts, and other relevant information to understand the anticipated demand patterns. The second is the determined capacities for each period. This may include assessing the workforce availability, equipment capacity, and other resources that impact the company's capabilities. The third one is the identify company or departmental policies that are pertinent. Consider any specific policies or guidelines that are relevant to the company or department's operations. These policies may include contains related to labor contracts, overtime regulations, or other factors that need to be considered during the planning process. The fourth one is the determine unit cost. In this part, it calculates the cost associated with different productions and resource allocations options. This involves considering factors such as labor costs, material costs, inventory holding costs, and subcontracting expenses and other relevant cost factors. The fifth one is the develop alternative plans and costs. This plan represents a different approach to meeting the demand while considering cost implications. These alternatives may involve adjustment in workforce levels, production schedules, inventory management, subcontracting decisions, and other strategies. Last is the select the plan that best satisfies objectives, otherwise return to step 5. The chosen plan should effectively balance customer demand, resource utilizations, and cost considerations. If one of the plans satisfy the objectives, return to step 5 to explore additional alternatives or modifications to the existing plans. Is the trial and error techniques. Trial and error approaches consist of developing simple tables or graph that enables planners to visually compare projected demand requirements with existing capacity. By examining these visual representations, planners can assess the feasibility and viability of different productions and resource allocations options. Next is alternative are compared based on their total cost. During the trial and error process, different alternatives are evaluated and compared based on their total cost. This includes considering factors such as labor costs, material costs, inventory holding costs, and any other relevant cost factors. And next is the disadvantage of such an approach is that it does not necessarily result in an optional aggregate plan. So while trial and error can give a feasible solutions, it may not be the absolute best options to find the most optimal plan. Other mathematical techniques like linear programming or simulations are used, which explore more possibilities and con- constraints to identify the best solutions. Next is the trial and error techniques assumptions. The first is the regular output capacities is the same in all periods. It assumes that the production's capacity remains constant throughout the planning period with no significant variations or changes in the available output capacity. Next is the cost is a linear functions composed of unit cost and the number of units. Next is also assumes that the cost associated with each decision's options is a linear functions that combines the unit cost with the number of unit produced or utilized. Next is plans are visible. At this part, plans considered during the trial and error process are possible and can be implemented without any constraints or limitations. Next is all costs associated with the decisions options can be represented by a lump sum. All the costs associated with the specific decisions options can be represented as a simplifying cost analysis and comparison. Next is cost figures can be reasonable estimate and are constant for the planning period. Cost figures used in the analysis can be well evaluated and these costs remain constant throughout the planning period. Next is inventories are built up and drawn down at a uniform rate throughout each period. That inventories are managed by always building them up and bringing out them down at a uniform rate throughout each planning period. Last is the backlogs are treated as if they exist the entire period. Any backlog or back orders are treated as if they exist for the entire planning period and are not subject to any specific time variations or changes. The next is this is the example of cumulative graph. As you can see, we have inventory build-up, inventory shortage, and cumulative productions and cumulative demand. The next is the mathematical techniques. Mathematical techniques have linear programming models, simulations models, computerized models that can be tested under different scenarios to identify. Mathematical techniques in aggregate planning involve using models such as linear programming and simulations to optimize decisions making and find solutions to planning problems. Linear programming models can aim to find the best solutions based on given constraints, while simulations models provide a computerized platform for testing different scenarios and evaluating their outcomes. And that's all of my report. Thank you for listening.